Good morning. Welcome to our State of the Industry webinar that we're doing for you guys today. We're really excited to be here with you. I'm Darren Barney, President CEO of Elite. I'm here with Jim Murphy and Dan Buss. To those of you that are Top Shop clients, may not be familiar with Jim. Jim is an awesome coach and facilitator of pro service. He's a wealth of knowledge and just a great guy. And excited to have him with us here today. So, Jim, do you want to tell him a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'd be happy to. One of the things that Darren's really good at is fluffing people up. So you can see that he's just done that for me. So I've been been moving along and coaching all the guys and gals in pro service since the start of it. Back in '08 is when we actually began the program. So and now it's kind of strange to say this, but I've been now coaching 25 years, and there's actually people that are in the group that have been with me that long. So it's really quite an honor to spend some time with all of you this afternoon and this morning. So I wanted to give just a little bit of a reasoning behind why I do this, because there are those in the audience that haven't had an opportunity to be exposed to this, being involved with pro service. And so the reason that I do this on a yearly basis is that I try to keep all the guys and gals in pro service on kind of a cutting edge, so to speak, of what I think is happening within the industry, and to be well positioned in their businesses going forward, in addition to also having some understanding of what's happening within the economy, which can have some influence obviously on business as well. This is really a hobby for me. I've been a stock guy for years and love to study companies just as a hobby. And I mean, that sounds kind of sick that somebody's reading annual reports in the evening for entertainment value as opposed to watching a movie, but that's just how I'm wired. So I have a lot of fun putting these together. I like giving an overview of what I've kind of seen from just kind of an entertainment standpoint in business from the previous year, and then getting into just some insights and some just peering into the crystal ball of what maybe coming up as far as the U.S. economy is concerned, and then really kind of diving in a bit to looking at the auto industry itself, and then drilling down just a little bit further in what would I see on the horizon for us in the auto repair industry, and then really give some actionable items, which I think that all of you really should have a pen and paper handy, because I really like to give sort of a strategic plan of what we should be paying attention to going forward.
That's awesome. We were actually on this pro service cruise a couple of weeks ago, and Jim gave this presentation, and it was incredible. And it was neat to look around and see all these people writing down notes, and I'm writing down notes, and it's a lot of good information here. And actually, Jim and Dan were talking to us about it. Said, "Hey, you know what? We should do this for the Top Shop coaching clients too." And I thought, man, what a great idea!
Yeah.
So thank you, Jim, for being here and doing that.
Absolutely.
I think they're going to find a lot of value in it.
Yeah.
So
my pleasure. Yep.
You talking about me fluffing you? I mean, I'm not fluffing. It's the truth, man. You're awesome. I love working with you. And a lot of good insight. So,
well, thanks.
Also excited to have Dan Buss with us here too. Dan is our maintenance meetings facilitator. He helps out with Jim and does a lot of good stuff for pro service, helping to maximize numbers each month and talk about how to improve things. And really glad to have Dan joining us today as well. So thank you, Dan, for being here.
Thank you.
It's always great to have you a part of these things too. So, all right. So a little bit of housekeeping before we turn the time over to Jim. So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to have Jim do his presentation. Then about halfway through, we're going to stop and answer any questions that you may have. And so what we'll do is there's a Q&A section on the bottom of your screen. And if you hover your mouse down there over it, you'll see it. You can go ahead and type your questions in there. And then once again, halfway through, we'll open it up and answer some of those questions for you. And then in the very end, we'll do the same thing again. So we'll have two Q&A sessions for you guys to ask any questions and get clarification, or just comment on how cool Jim is, whatever you want to do. We're good.
Yeah. So, and just so that they know too, so I strategically put the break kind of after some of the US stuff that I want to put together. So, and it doesn't have to be a question necessarily about what's the content of the presentation too. So I feel pretty confident and comfortable to be able to answer questions that you may have that you maybe don't understand as to what's swirling around in some of the news economically, that you might say, hey, I'd like to get a little clarification on. I'm I'm happy to do that, and I'm really comfortable saying I don't know. So I'm okay with that too. So, but I'll do the best I can to field anything that you might have a question about.
Cool. All right. Well, anything else, Dan, before you and I disappear and turn it over to Jim?
Nope, I think we're ready to roll.
Okay, sounds good. All right, Jim. Well, thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Well, just again, because we're pretty friendly bunch, I certainly want to give my thanks to the team at Elite. We've had some transition over the last year, so I really want to thank Darren, especially for all of his hard work and being the new fearless leader of the organization. I certainly want to thank his wife Ginger, who's been very helpful in some of the organizational process. Michelle Cooper, she's been very helpful. She works a lot on special projects, both for Pro Service and for the rest of Elite. So I want to recognize her. Tom's been another person that I've gotten to slowly get to know, but being the director of operations, he's been very helpful. And Sarah's one of the newest team members and being a director of growth and development. So I wanted to certainly recognize her as well. So this is a lot of the future of the team of Elite, and I'm excited to see where all of them are going to take all of us going forward. And then before I thank the last person I want to recognize, I think it's really important to get something straight with all of you that's taken many years to realize, and that is that marriage is a relationship in which one person is always right and the other is a husband. So I want to thank my favorite brunette, Sherry. So for those of you that have hung out with both of us for a long period of time, we've had a very long but fun goal of being able to see all 63 U.S. national parks. And so we accomplished that last year, and that was just an amazing goal for us. And so at this point in time now, we're looking at towards the future. We've been to 6 out of 7 continents, and Sherry's really pressuring me now to set foot on Antarctica, and I really hate the cold. And so we'll just see how that all goes. In 2023, I always like to kind of take a look back. There's always some interesting news that may or may not have some effect on us, but I wanted to spend a little time kind of reviewing some of that. So as the world races to regulate AI, or artificial intelligence, it was a good year. Investment poured into AI startups. Big tech firms deployed their scale and cloud computing operations to build ties with Veal's new leaders. And NVIDIA became the first chip maker to hit a market capitalization of $1 trillion thanks to its demand for AI semiconductors. Investor enthusiasm was matched with worry among lawmakers, who often struggle to keep pace with the companies developing the technology. But the first steps were taken towards developing for AI have really started to take shape. President Biden issued an executive order in October focused on the technology's implications for national security. China imposed restrictions on certain types of AI, and the EU lawmakers passed one of the world's first regimes to regulate the technology. But amid desperate efforts, they also was an attempt to achieve some measure of international collaboration. So last year, more than 24 countries, including rivals US and China, tech executives and researchers attended Britain's AI Safety Summit. The event didn't end with an agreement for a new set of rules, but the governments warned of dangers posed by most advanced AI systems and agreed to keep talking. And we're going to talk a little bit about AI and how that fits in with what we're looking at in the future as a group of repair shops. Next thing was Barbenheimer. They dominated the box office in July. 2 movies were released at the same day, provided long-awaited signal that theaters had bounced back from the pandemic. Barbie is a comedy based on the Mattel doll, and Oppenheimer is a biopic about the creator of the atomic bomb. So together, they gave North American multiplexes their biggest weekend since Avengers Endgame when it arrived in April of 2019. So some moviegoers even watched them back to back. So the movies opened as the Writers Guild of America and Actors Union were both on strike, bringing the industry in hopes for consistent stream of hits to a near standstill. But they both reached a deal last November. In March 10th, the biggest bank failure since 2008 financial crisis, the government seized Silicon Valley Bank. Just to give a recap, the bank's clients spooked by news that the bank was working to shore up its finances, and then Moody's had downgraded its bond rating and had pulled out more than $40 billion in their deposits. So on March 12th, regulators shut down Signature Bank, which is a New York-based lender. A lot of guys in ProService had questions about this. Should they be keeping their money in medium-sized banks? So there was a lot of fear swirling around during that period of time that a lot of us in ProService certainly interacted about. So the bank's failures led to fears about stability of other mid-sized lenders. Wall Street's biggest banks agreed to give $30 billion to First Republic, and Swiss authorities brokered a deal for UBS to take over its domestic rival. So that was Credit Suisse. So, but even as a multi-billion-dollar intervention wasn't enough to save First Republic, federal regulators seized the lender in May and sold it to JP Morgan Chase. On September 14th, the United Auto Workers Union began its first strike that simultaneously targeted all three Detroit automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, the parent of Ram, Jeep, and Chrysler. It was interesting. The union broke from its traditional approach of idling most or all of operations at one company instead of taking action at a limited number of each of the company's locations. After 6 weeks, the workers reached tentative agreements with three companies, giving workers their biggest pay raises in decades while avoiding a protracted work stoppage. So the UAW's success inspired it to go after non-unionized car makers, including Tesla and foreign companies. And that really has had some influence on looking at where wages have been going over the last year on a national basis. So the union has had some influence both with United Parcel Service and also with the automakers. So it is it's kind of interesting how I think that will continue to have some influence on where we're going to be going forward with wages in our industry. Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour. So her career encompassing run of shows was a blockbuster last year coming into this year, selling $14 million in tickets each night, according to one estimate, setting it on pace to potentially reach $1.4 billion in total sales by the time the tour ends this year. So last July, she broke the record for the most chart-topping albums by a woman, also engineered a new type of deal for her concert film. She negotiated directly with the theater chain AMC Entertainment to release Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour. So that allowed her to bypass big studios and keep 57% of the ticket revenue. So during its opening weekend in October, the film made an estimated 3-day gross of $97 million in North America theaters, easily becoming the biggest concert film opening ever. In addition, which I thought was kind of funny because I'm a music lover, Taylor Swift broke Elvis's record for the most weeks atop the Billboard 200 chart album as a solo artist with 68 weeks. Then on November 2nd, after 4 hours of deliberation, a jury found Sam Bankman-Fried, founder of the FTX cryptocurrency exchange, guilty of 7 charges of fraud and conspiracy for stealing billions of dollars from customers and investors. It was a stunning fall for Bankman-Fried, a one-time poster child for the cryptocurrency industry, who was worth about $20 billion just a year earlier. So after the FTX collapse, many of his closest lieutenants and executives agreed to work with prosecutors and testified against him. So in a trial in New York, he was portrayed as a brazen young founder who funneled stolen money into his investments and used for extravagant spending. So Bankman-Fried is expected to appeal. So he's scheduled to be sentenced on March 28th. So 2023 had a lot of business news. I thought was pretty interesting. But let's explore what 2024 and beyond might hold in store for all of us. So the question on everyone's mind is whether the U.S. economy will enjoy a soft landing in 2024 or succumb to a recession. So with each piece of data dissected and interpreted according to market participants' biases, such scrutiny stems from U.S. Federal Reserve's reliance on data dependency, which leaves all of us wondering and at the mercy of each data release that comes out as to what's going to occur. So let's quickly visit what that terminology means. You probably hear it come up on different news broadcasts, but basically a soft landing occurs when an economy sustains a mild slowdown, where consumer and investment spending softens, but it continues to register positive growth. And we right now currently are experiencing some of that. A hard landing describes a recession with a sharp contraction in spending, resulting in many workers really losing their jobs and companies significantly reducing their capital investments. So take the recent data, the U.S. non-farms payroll, it actually rose 216,000 in December. The consensus was 170,000 and at 353,000 for January. So most on Wall Street agreed that it suggests a very healthy labor market and hence a strong economy with a soft landing in sight. Those concerned about the economic contraction may be ahead because they are focused instead on an average hourly earnings rising at an annual rate of 4.1%, a level inconsistent with the Fed's 2% inflation target. So in line with this thinking, such high wage growth indicates interest rates will have to be maintained at current levels for longer, which may eventually propel the economy into a recession. On another side note to this, as you dig more into the numbers, you'll see that the unemployment rate still decreased. So next to healthcare and government, they were the two major contributors to jobs that were added to the economy. And then talent-seeking jobs decreased and has been steadily decreasing when you review the labor force participation rate, which is now down to 62.5%. And in previous State of the Industries, I've gone through a lot of what that actually means when you look at the wage force from age 25 to age 55 or 58, some depending on what they put it. But when you look at that labor force participation rate in that age group, 62.5% of those that are in the economy are currently working, which in a way kind of seems like a low number, but it's fairly consistent through the last several decades. So then lastly, hourly wages for non-farm payroll have increased again, and they increased 4% overall for 2023. So if you look, none of these indicators would lead us to believe that a hard landing is really in the near future. So next, the share of inflation basket components running at more than 4% on an annualized basis is well above the pre-pandemic level. So driven primarily by services inflation, which again is all of us. So all of us have felt the wage pressure in this industry, especially with technicians. So I'm not suggesting that we'll see a dramatic change in our industry, but I anticipate that rising unemployment and slowing wage growth should help normalize the pace of services inflation in 24, which is really what the Fed is looking at as a crucial level for its 2% inflation target. So that'll help the Fed ease into a soft landing if wage inflation does not run as rampant as we've seen over the last 2 years. And it's really kind of interesting when you look at the overall, this is the upper area of green. You know, this is what all of us in the group have certainly felt when it comes to wage pressure, and especially with technicians and quite frankly, advisors as well. And where we saw such a spike in the overall wage growth through that period right after the pandemic compared to, you know, other components in looking at CPI. So again, I think that we're still going to see some pressure in this particular area, but at this point, there has been a bit of softening. So there could be a potential point in the U.S. labor market. So the labor market is typically a lagging indicator, so it follows rather than leads a business cycle. So yet a few indicators foretell a potential turning point. So recent movement in indicators, including private sector job growth, part-time employment, and long-term unemployment, suggests that the first 6 months of 2024, the U.S. Unemployment rate could jump by 0.5 percentage point. So this chart is comprised of long-term unemployed, part-time employees, discouraged job seekers, and temporary help employment. So the combination of statistics, they place into a graph to see if there's going to be an increase in the unemployment rate in the next 6 months. And if you look at where we're at, when we've had, these are periods of recessions that we've occurred. So this was during that was right after 2000. This is the period of time that was during the great financial crisis, and then obviously a very thin area of a recession during the pandemic. But each time that you see these combination of components, you see definitely a rise in the probability of unemployment occurring. So that's what we've seen over the last 6 to 8 months. And so it'll be interesting to see if this is going to foretell a future of unemployment continuing to rise. So, however, the debate's nowhere settled and probably will not be settled for quite some time. So, in fact, the Business Cycle Dating Committee at the National Bureau of Economic Research, which determines really the official date of any recession that arrives, and that announcement usually comes about a year after this recession has begun. So I'm in the camp of those expecting a mild recession in the U.S. potentially this year. The combination of high interest rates and a restrictive bank lending standards that are in place today has historically resulted in recessions. But soft landings, on the other hand, have featured rising interest rates, but no overt tightening of lending standards. From all the reading that I do, I estimate the probability of a recession, probably a light recession at best, at around 30% over the next 12 months. But that still leaves the probability of a soft landing at about 70%. So I acknowledge that shifts in monetary and fiscal policy over recent years could mean merely lower growth as opposed to a recession. So if we look at the chart, you can see over the past year, lending standards by banks certainly have tightened. And this also leads to contraction in the economy along with the Federal Reserve actions. And so you'll see where they're actually measuring lending standards that have been created for commercial industrial loans, working with some of the guys in ProService that have been looking to go out and buy money, certainly have experienced some of that tightening in lending standards. So as you can see, there was the tightening, and now there's beginning to be a bit of softening, which is again is another good indicator that potentially we would see a softer landing. So my next point to review is where the federal funds rate is really headed. So the Feds have indicated over several meetings that it has completed its rate hike campaign. So in a recent statement, they're careful to note, and this is Fed speak, that the committee will continue to assess additional information and its implications for monetary policy. So in determining the extent of any additional policy firming that may be appropriate to return inflation to 2% over time, the committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy, the lags of which the monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation, and the economic and financial developments. So what does all that mean? So my translation is that this points towards a pivot in policy as the Fed moves to reduce a restrictive policy rate as inflation eases towards a forecast of 2.4% in its core personal consumption expenditures index, probably by the end of 2025. So this does not include really volatile food and energy components, but looking at the core areas, they're seeing the gradual decline in inflationary numbers. So that's again a good thing from an interest rate standpoint. So when you look at the Fed's forecast of its policy rate, there's something that is put together that's called a dot plot. So there are all of the Federal Reserve and their other authorities that are all making predictions within or have influence within the Federal Reserve. So the dot plot for 2024, as you'll see, shows a median of 4.6%, and then 3.6% in 2025 and 2.9% in 2026. So the long run policy rate stands at about 2.5% for the longer term. So if their predictions are correct, that is potentially the path of what we'll see for Fed interest rates. So the forecast indicates that the ultimate decision of the Fed's policy includes 300 basis points and a move to 2.5% in their rate. So I think this may be somewhat over optimistic given the fact of how the economy is continuing to grow and inflation tends to be a bit sticky. And we've got a stronger pace of economic growth and modestly higher inflation. So it will result in 2.5% to 3% inflation target and maybe a Fed neutral rate of 3%. But whatever the case, interest rates are coming down. The term spectrum along the Treasury curve, I think, is likely to return from its inversion over the last 2 years, assuming a positive upward slope bolsters net interest margins inside the financial sector and really boosts demand for financing. So to encapsulate the discussion, I want to quickly review what are the key indicators that I pay attention to, that I bring up generally every year as I spend time talking with all the guys and gals in pro service. So first of all was the yield curve, and many of you have heard that within the news, is that the 1-year Treasury yield rose above the 10-year Treasury yield decisively in July of 2022, and the negative gap widened further over most of the following year, peaking in June of 23. So the yield curve inversion is an unequivocal indication that credit conditions are tightening, and currently a D inversion is underway, which we would normally indicate that we are actually in a recession, or that the economy is actually responding in a recessionary manner, which is kind of strange as you continue to see the expansion in the economy. So we'll see what happens over the next few quarters as we go forward. The next one is looking at ISM, or new orders minus inventories. So the Purchasing Managers Index is a survey data instead of actually hard data. So last year, the number, I believe, was influenced by the auto worker strike, and it's been more natural as of late. The next indicator is looking at the Conference Board of Leading Economic Index. So the indicator turned negative in the third quarter of 22. And the index has continued to fall since that date into a deep negative territory. And this is one of the strongest indicators that a recession will occur. There are 10 components in that index, and I'm happy to answer the questions for those who want to know a little bit more about that. So you can ask me later about it, or just email me and ask me about it. Next is looking at unemployment claims. And so claims surged higher in June of last year, but really have settled down since then. And then you're looking at the unemployment rate that's been settling down the latter part of 2023. So any move above 4% is what I tend to pay attention to at this point, because that would be another signal that the recession is underway. And then the Fed funds rate has risen over the 6-month annualized run rate of normalized GDP, either before or at the start of every recession in the past 70 years. So currently the funds rate is above the growth rate, meaning that it's another precondition that potentially we could see a recession. So the summary of the economic projections strongly supports the idea that the economy is likely to avoid a recession, and that rate cuts are coming this year, probably in the latter half. The Fed indicated here recently that they are prolonging what their initial discussions were in December, where they announced that they were looking for 3-quarter rate cuts within 2024. But as of getting this last week, the presentation was made to Congress by Powell, indicating that they were going to be slow and methodical in looking at accomplishing that. So in addition to the Fed's projections of higher growth and lower inflation, the central bank is projecting a long-run unemployment rate of about 4.1%, which by any metric implies full employment inside the American economy. So the major takeaway for the December policy meeting is that the Federal Reserve is forecasting a soft landing, full employment, and it intends to reduce its policy rate by 75 basis points, probably late this year, to support the expanding economy. Another area that is helping the Feds with their fight against inflation is crude oil pricing. Since peaking in late September at $94 a barrel, and crude oil prices have fallen significantly to just about in the mid-70s currently. That has been driven in part by a record U.S. production that's now over 13.2 million barrels per day, recently topping the pre-pandemic level of 13 barrels per day for the first time ever. A lot of chatter that happens in the group talking about the Biden administration looking at being more restrictive towards oil and energy in general. Well, that policy has definitely reversed over the term, where we are producing far more oil than we did before the pandemic. So to counter elevated U.S. production and boost oil prices, the OPEC Plus members recently announced voluntary production cuts totaling 2.2 million barrels a day in Q1 of 24. However, it remains to be seen if the production cuts will be really enough to offset the record production in the United States. So another upset for OPEC that I think is favorable for energy pricing is that Angola has left OPEC as of the beginning of this year. So that follows the departure of Ecuador in 2020 and Qatar in 2019. So Angola's departure from OPEC will leave it with about 12 members and crude oil production of about 27 million barrels a day. So that equates to about 27% of the 102 million barrels per day that the world in general produces. So the combination of events should keep a cap on oil pricing this year, and that pricing should aid us as an industry on miles driven by our clients. So you'll see again the difference where you look at the price of West Texas Intermediate crude and how it has continued to fall during that period of time. We're on a slupward, given where we're in 24. It's on a slightly rising trend at the moment. And then you can see U.S. oil production overall has continued to increase by a fair amount. So it's pretty interesting and to see where this will head. But I think right now it's having a positive effect on our clients and miles driven. So Darren, I wanted to kind of make this the halfway point in the presentation. And so if there's any immediate questions before I move on, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, yeah, you've gone over a lot, Jim. It's great. We do have a question from Dave Burke, and let me turn on his stuff here and let him talk. Dave,
Okay, cool.
Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, can hear you great.
Awesome, man. Yeah, when you want to ask Jim your question?
Yeah, so in regards to the oil prices and the fact that we're drilling more now and that seems to be dropping the prices down a little bit. My question is, I know that we sold off a huge amount of our oil reserves. How much did that play a part in the decrease of the price?
So that played a big that was a big influencer early on, and again, I don't want to get into politics, but it does influence some of what happens economically. So I don't want to act as I'm sitting on one side of the fence or the other when I make this comment, but I think it's important to note is that when gasoline prices were really rising at a very rapid level, it was politically devastating for parties in power to see that price happening, because there was remember we were in midterm elections during that period of time. So there was a lot of a release of oil out of the reserves in order to try and temper pricing. So we're in the process now of looking at replenishing that supply. So having oil pricing still being more moderate than what it was, I think is where we're going to be at this point. I think we're going to continue to keep building reserves again because of the fact of U.S. oil production being where it's at, and again, not as much influence from OPEC as we once saw. So I think that's where we're at the moment. Is that we're going to continue to see this tempering of oil per barrel probably around this level, at least in the near term.
Great, that answers my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks, Dave. Russell McLeod's got his hand up too, so let me turn on Russell's mic here.
Okay, cool.
Hi, Russell. Can you hear us okay, Russell?
Yep, I sure can. You got me?
Hey, Russell.
Yes, sir.
Hi there. Jim, just a quick follow-up to that question. I think I heard you say they are replenishing our reserves at this time.
There is some indication that that's occurring. Again, this is not, the federal government doesn't actually give you an indication like we're on, we're off, we're on, we're off. But last reading that I saw is that there's replenishment of the reserve occurring now, as opposed to looking at discharging out of the reserve.
Well, that's good. The question I had, Jim, it's probably a very stupid one, but I'll ask it. What's been frustrating to me to see we had the high inflation numbers for about a year. It was pretty bad. And then now you hear them talk about, oh, inflation's so much better. It's down. But it's like compounded interest, right? It's price increase upon top of price increase. So 2%. Well, I'm not cheering about that because we still have, 15% over a period of time. Do you see that there could be a reversal in a negative? Yeah, probably not, huh?
No,
it's going back down. Yeah.
No, I don't see a reversal in pricing. Generally speaking, when a contraction of pricing usually occurs during recessionary periods. And it's usually from major contractions when you see, especially on the service side of the business. I mean, that's where we've seen a lot of the inflationary pressure. So it would take a major contraction in the economy to really see pricing reversal occur. I look at the same thing within your shops, right? So, you know, we've really put the gas pedal down looking at raising pricing because of the pressure because of wages, right? And our cost of goods sold with technicians. So that being the case, I think it would take a major contraction to see any of you looking at wanting to be influenced in doing any kind of price reversal at this point. So, and I think that's going to be the case within the economy in general, is that we're going to continue to keep seeing, you know, the add-ons with pricing in that manner. You know, again, at the end of the day, we're talking about the fact that you know, if you're looking at a 2% inflation rate, and if you look at the rule of sevens, you know, at the end of the day, you're going to have pricing double in 36 years. So that $700,000 house that you just bought, you know, and if it rose at a 2% inflation rate, then it's eventually going to double. It doesn't reverse. I mean, that's not the intent of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is looking to moderate what the inflation is, and the overall growth in pricing is tends to be a positive effect for the economy, at least statistically. So we'll see as time goes on what happens with all of that. And there's some other things that I want to address as we get further into some of our discussion regarding some of that. So,
Yeah, kind of figured. Thank you, Jim.
Yep.
Awesome. That's the only questions we got right now. Does anybody
Okay.
else have any questions for Jim, right? They want to ask? Okay.
All right, let's rock on then.
Oh,
So
yeah. Brandon Barr does. Yeah, let me turn him
Oh,
on.
okay, cool.
Hi, Brandon. Hang on just a second. Let me get you turned on. Okay. You should be good, buddy.
He's muted.
Brandon, you'll need to unmute, buddy.
There we go. You mentioned inflation at 2% and raising wage growth at 4.1%. How are companies keeping pace with gross profit then?
So remember, that's the Fed's target of 2%. It's not currently what we're experiencing, right? Wage growth is around 4.1% currently. And the Feds are looking to try and tamper that just a bit. But if we continue to stay in this environment, similar to what we've had in the past, where we're getting a higher than normalized inflation rate, then you're going to be getting more recommendations out of me to look at increasing labor rate, right? So, and remember, part of our discussion, which I think is extremely important, is that more of the shock is going to come from your advisors at the counter than they ever will from your customers when you make some of these leaps in labor rate. And so my opinion is that, Brandon, I would still suggest that we make a projection this year to that inflation from a wage standpoint is probably going to be in that 4 to 5%. And so I would take and I would spread that over the 12-month period. So whatever the labor rate is currently, right? So if you're saying, okay, my labor rate is currently at $150, right? So if we're looking at timesing that by 5%, so you're going to be somewhere around 157.50 by year end, right? So if we take that and we spread it over the 12-month period, the shock that's going to be felt by your front counter if you do it consistently every month will not be that significant, and neither will your customers. But at the end of the day, that will give you the ability to continue to keep pace with the pressures that you may be feeling on a cost of goods sold basis from your technicians looking for additional wages because competition is pinging them with better opportunity for wage growth, right? So we don't want to fall into that trap of others potentially accelerating, or even if they're not running as well a business as you do, Brandon, and they're just now throwing money out into the marketplace looking for technicians, you'll still be able to satisfy those particular wage needs, given the fact that if we look at spreading it over that 12-month period, another $7.50, it's going to be, the significance of what the counter feels won't be that great. So that's why I think it's important to be consistent in looking at increasing your labor rates through that 1 year period of what projected wage inflation will be.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Any other questions for Jim, guys? Okay. Looks like we're good to go, Jim. Do you want to go on to the next stuff?
Yep, let's rock on.
Awesome.
So let's bring it down a level off of a national level, and let's start talking a little bit about what's happening within driving habits of our population in our database. So the Wall Street Journal really did a pretty interesting article. I thought it was a great story on the fact that we own more cars as a country, but we're actually driving less. So America has become a stay-at-home nation, despite all the cars and trucks in our garages. And here's some excerpts from the article that I want to share. So the COVID-19 pandemic changed how Americans get around in ways that could be really long-lasting. What it didn't change was our appetite for cars and pickup trucks. So before the pandemic, the number of registered vehicles on U.S. roads grew at about the same pace as the amount of driving being done on those roads. But we kept adding more vehicles on the road. So even though prices shot up because shortage of computer chips cut back the number of vehicles for sale, the result is that we have more cars, but we're putting fewer miles on them, and forecasts suggest that really that's not likely to change very much. And when you look at miles driven, so we can't always look at charting as an isolated situation. So we look at and you hear some chatter from some individuals in the industry, hey, things are great because miles driven are increasing. Woo! Okay, well, that's great. But at the same time, if we look at the number of vehicles in operation, that is also climbing. So we have to keep certain things in perspective, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a moment. So really, what's behind the divergence? So first, let's look at the number of vehicles in operation, which grew to about 284 million in 2023 from 278 million in 2019 before the pandemic got underway. So it isn't that people are buying a second or third vehicle in greater numbers. Rather, it's the growth in the vehicles that roughly matches the growth in the number of households in the U.S. So boomers are starting to get carved off the planet, but when you look at millennials and household formation, it's increased pretty dramatically because now currently they are the largest generation within the United States that is accomplishing that, and Gen Z is right behind them with the leading edge at 25 years old. So what we're now starting to see is we're seeing household formation that's increasing, and that's putting more pressure on the number of vehicles. So the average number of vehicles per household has stayed steady at about 2.2 vehicles for the last 2 decades. So that was with a brief drop following the 07-09 recession, according to S&P Global Mobility. So you can see where the bit of a dip was. But overall, we haven't changed much when you look at the number of vehicles per household. So what has changed are the types of vehicles that we buy. So Americans have been moving away from passenger cars and towards bigger and more expensive pickup trucks and sport utility vehicles. And all those vehicles had to stay in the garage during the pandemic. And so now with the pandemic largely behind us, many of those vehicles are still there. So as of 2022, the number of trips Americans took had fallen by more than a third compared with 2017, according to surveys conducted by the Transportation Department. So a trip here is defined as going from one place to another. So in other words, driving from the grocery store and back counts as 2 trips. And when you look at what's happened from 01 and the number of trips per person by the number of household vehicles available, you can see how there's been a steady decline over the last 2 decades for the number of trips even that have occurred. So the rise in remote work accounts for some, but not all of this decline. So shopping, restaurant dining, and recreational trips, regardless of travel mode, are all down from 2017. So the pandemic has really turned us into homebodies. So how long will it last? Well, it's hard to say, but up-to-date data suggests we aren't going to return to our old habits in the near future. Research by economists shows that roughly 28% of workdays were at home in October, despite pressure from employers to get workers to return to the office. So many companies have settled on hybrid work weeks, both in the office and at home. And the number of miles driven per capita in the US, which bounced back in the early days of the economic recovery from the pandemic, has flatlined since 2022 at below pre-pandemic levels. So meanwhile, many of us are still paying off our cars. So higher vehicle prices at the Federal Reserve's interest rate increases have pushed up monthly payments to the point where more borrowers are having trouble actually paying back their loans. And that could be a problematic area we'll have to pay attention to as a group. So the share of auto loans flowing into serious delinquency rose to its highest level since 2010 in the third quarter of 2023, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. So if the trend continues of more cars and less miles, then strategically, how are we going to look at changing our marketing strategies to be more time-based for maintenance compared to more mileage-based? And it may be something that I think within the group that we need to start discussing and looking at, because if these trends are going to continue and there is a decrease in the number of trips or the number of miles driven, and we're seeing an increase just in household formation, our marketing strategy, I think, will have to start to change, or even are looking at our suggestions on at least in certain parts of the country, as to whether are we going to make recommendations for maintenance more on time-based situations as opposed to mileage-based. And I think those are some of the discussions we need to start having. So next, does this mean they're going to be buying fewer cars and trucks in the future? I don't think so. So the pandemic sent many families moving to suburban areas or to southern and western states, places where they're more likely to need cars. So new vehicle sales declined during the pandemic because of supply constraints. So now those are largely resolved and sales are catching up. So analysts at S&P Global Mobility stated that U.S. new vehicle sales rose 7.3% in 2023 from the previous year. So although some risks persist, which include macro uncertainty, inflation, higher rates, weak consumer confidence, potential U.S. recession, the forecast for 2024, I think, is really more constructive. So after a SAR of 13.7 million in 22, and 2023, it closed at 15.5 million. Projections are that auto sales will increase to 16.1 million this year, seasonally adjusted, and build towards a peak in the U.S. auto cycle in 2028 of 18.1 million. So interesting, one thing that you have to pay attention to is that vehicle sales, even though we had a couple of recessionary periods where there was certainly some contraction for car sales, those of you that still remember the cash for clunkers period of time, but the U.S. auto cycle definitely moves in a 7 to 8 year cycles. So that being the case, I think we're still in this upcycle until 2028. So next, let's move into a discussion about electric vehicles, because that's always a hot topic for the group. So what's interesting is that electric vehicle sales growth hit a speed bump in the U.S. this past year, and the impact is being felt really throughout the industry. So car makers around the world have invested billions of dollars in EV technology, and they've spurred on by tailpipe emission regulations that were really designed to boost sales of battery-powered models. But as customers in the U.S. hesitate to make the switch from traditional gas engine vehicles, some auto companies are delaying plans on electric vehicle spending. So sales on electric vehicle models rose rapidly in the first 11 months of last year, faster than the car market as a whole, but a slower pace than in previous years. So car executives say that they are confident that sales will accelerate as additional lower price models come out and the availability of public chargers improve. But in the near term, cooling buyer interest has weighed on U.S. markets and really for the automakers overall that have really ramped up their vehicle and battery production in anticipation of larger surge in customer demand. So electric vehicle sales began to stall in the latter half of 2023, a move that the car executives attributed to relatively high prices of electric models. And you can see again where, when we're looking at just the increase year over year on a monthly basis. So that increase is definitely slowing at this point. So as a result, electric cars and trucks are piling up on dealers' lots, and that's causing auto companies to reassess their investment plans. So it takes a dealership around 3 weeks longer to sell an EV than a gasoline vehicle, according to data from car shopping website Edmunds. So a year ago, battery-powered models were selling faster than their gasoline counterparts. And you can see again the spread where EVs were selling more quickly, and so their days supply on dealers' lots were less. And that divergence has definitely happened at this point in time, where electric vehicles are now slowing are selling at a slower pace than gasoline powered models. So as a result, electric cars and trucks are really piling up on dealers' lots, and they're causing auto companies to reassess their investment plans. So it like I said, it's taking a much longer than it was a year ago. So part of the challenge of the automakers is that the demand for electric models isn't spread evenly across the United States. So sales are concentrated in a handful of states, according to data from the S&P Global Mobility. So between July and September, nearly a quarter of all vehicle sales sold in California were EVs, compared with a little over 3% in Michigan, where General Motors and Ford have their headquarters, according to the trade group Alliance for Automotive Innovation. So they analyzed a lot of the data from S&P Global Mobility. So most buyers are in urban areas where public charging infrastructure is more readily available, said the dealers and the car executives. So through September, 6 of the top 10 car makers for electric cars and trucks were in cities in the West Coast, and the top 4 were in metropolitan areas within California. So you can see where the concentration of a lot of the sales are, certainly within California, Washington, right behind, and then obviously DC, then it starts to spread out a little more to New Jersey and some of the Northeast. So dealers and car makers say many car buyers are still reluctant to ditch their gas vehicles for an electric model. They're put off by relatively high price of technology and concerns about the ability to recharge them easily. So automakers are offering a combination of discounts and lower interest rates deals in an attempt to draw in buyers. So those markdowns have led to a sharp decline in new EV prices and even a steeper decline in their counterparts for used vehicle market. So American buyers paid on average $51,668 for a new EV in November, compared to $44,000 for a new gasoline-powered model, according to J.D. Power. So really, when you think about it, why is there still resistance to EVs? So despite the uptick in EV adoption and incentives from the government, many people still avoid electric cars. So according to a 2023 study by Energy Policy Institute at the University of Chicago, 47% of Americans are unlikely to get an EV as their next car. So still a pretty significant resistance to this. So the issue from a public relations standpoint is that many felt that the battery car seamlessly fits right into a gasoline car's position, and it's becoming very obvious that it doesn't, and that's part of the problem. So what are the reasons why? Why is there such a resistance from the general public looking at electric vehicles at this point? So number one is cost concerns, where consumers generally see cars as expensive anyway, and electrified cars are usually present under this umbrella of advanced technology. So naturally, consumers would view it as expensive, and for the time being, they are. So as I mentioned in previous presentations, I think there needs to be price parity to ICE vehicles before we see any real acceleration in the adoption. And again, when we started talking about this about 7 years ago, there were a lot of projections that we would see price parity start to come into play by 2025. And so it's still not happening. So it's been a little bit slower than anticipated. So reason number two is really the lack of knowledge. So sometimes with new technology, there's a resistance to change because consumers don't understand the product or are unwilling to learn. So going forward, manufacturers will need to do a better job, in my opinion, of educating consumers if they're going to convert their vehicles to all electric, such as General Motors. Again, Mary Barra this week in her announcement reinforced that their company is going to go all electric by 2035. So I think that there's going to need to be a lot more education with the public before they look at trying to achieve that goal. So reason number three is electricity versus gasoline. So the convenience of gasoline overcharging an electric, I think, is another pain point. The price of charging a vehicle versus filling up a gas tank doesn't seem to sway customers towards adopting an EV, despite charging being much cheaper. So it's estimated that 80% of all charging sessions occur at home currently. So having access to charging at home, I believe, is going to be a key driver for adoption. And it's a challenge for those living in a condominium or an apartment where dedicated charging stations don't occur, and that can be a real challenge. So, and another thing to think about is that I had a neighbor in Flagstaff who purchased an electric vehicle, had to install a very expensive wiring run in his garage because it was being retrofitted into an older house, and didn't realize the cost before his electric car purchase. So, also those that have frequently long drives have to sit and wait for recharging with the current technology versus pumping gas. And then number 4 is looking at the charging network availability. So the growing number of electric cars across the US inevitably creates a need for a robust charging network. However, the availability and convenience of those charging stations isn't really up to par yet. The charging network is getting better, but it's still not available enough to make it convenient for consumers. So also reliability of the charging network is spotty. Some stations work, others don't. Some will fit the proper vehicles, others don't. So some charge faster than others. So eventually, as time goes on, I think it'll be that most vehicles will be charged at home, even in the evening during off-peak hours. Reason number 5, I think that there's still resistance, is that range anxiety. And we've talked a lot about it within the group. So concerns about charging network typically stem from range anxiety or the fear that an EV will run out of power before the owner finds a charging point. So the current federal administration made it a goal to build a network of 500,000 electric vehicle chargers across the country. So only time will tell as to whether the long-term goal will take hold and make a difference. And then reason number 6 is maintenance and repairs. So consumer surveys reveal that consumers feel that all car repairs are expensive. So while early indications show that EVs are cheaper to maintain, repair costs can be very expensive. So when something goes wrong, it can be much more expensive, and that's a fear in a consumer's mind. It was interesting, if you really look at some of the early statistics on this, Hertz Rental Car, they just announced that they're selling 20,000 EV vehicles from their US fleet, and they're going to use the money to purchase gasoline vehicles. So Hertz claims the demand for EVs has declined and that they're much pricier to maintain and repair. So selling off the vehicles means the company is set to lose about $245 million because of depreciation that was tied to Tesla lowering their vehicle prices. So lastly, last winter, a lot of you in the north, that had severe winter, at least for a short period of time, had been tough on EVs, with owners not being able to charge their vehicles in freezing weather or vehicles not operating properly. So what does it look like in the short term? So I think the US EV market achieved a major milestone in the electric transition in 2023. Nearly 1 million battery electric vehicles were sold in a 12-month period for the first time ever, according to Bloomberg, and the sales grew at a robust clip. But it's not all up and right when you look at this. So sales didn't climb quite as much as some automakers expected, prompting reevaluations and timing of the scope of their investments. So EVs are piling up on dealers' lot, and the headline after headline about slumping demand. Tesla might delay $1 billion manufacturing investment in Mexico. GM pumped the brakes on some of the planned EV truck production, along with scrapping their $5 billion partnership with Honda to make cheaper EVs. And Ford paused the $12 billion investment in EV factories, including one investment in the EV battery plants, and then slashed their production of electric 150 Lightning, among other signals that manufacturers are really reevaluating their EV plans. So there are some hopeful assumptions that the market was just going to go in a real nice straight line and there'd be no bumps along the path. But what we're seeing now is that in the early adopters, they've adopted. So by trying to get the mainstream consumer, I think it's going to be difficult in a high interest rate environment with a price premium that is currently existing out there for EVs. So at that point, an EV selling at the average listing price would cost a buyer $277 more compared to an internal combustion engine vehicle, assuming that they took a 60-month loan out at 8% interest. So as the demand started to ebb, inventories began stacking up. EVs are sitting on dealers' lots on average 9 days longer than ICE vehicles. And the EV inventory levels climbed more than 500% year over year in October last year. So I think it's likely to be a similar story in 2024, though with some notable wild cards in the mix. Namely, we've got the presidential election, and then the Fed's moves on interest rates could make a difference. So Car Gurus forecasted year-over-year EV sales growth of 42% in 2024, lower than 23's rate of about 50%, but still a significant number. And Edmund analysts expect EV market share to rise to 8% of total new vehicle sales from about 6.9%, which was around November of last year. So it's still coming. It just may be at a slower pace, and at the end of the day, really kind of a more conservative pace. And then enter hybrids, which an increasingly popular option for consumers is looking for a greener vehicle, minus the range concerns and steep price premium. So if you look at hybrid, that market share grew 99% from 2022 to November of 23, looking at Edmunds data, compared to a 25% increase for EVs. So Edmunds data also suggests that hybrids are selling faster and with fewer discounts than gas and electric counterparts. Again, those are favorable trends for our industry. So many industry experts say that they expect hybrids to become even more attractive choice for buyers in 2024. So most of the industry's focus remains on EV. Certainly a lot of chatter within a lot of news services, but hybrids are potentially a good Goldilocks scenario to get us toward a cleaner tech future. And 2023 survey Edmunds conducted found respondents were excited about EVs, but more comfortable buying a hybrid for their next car purchase before going fully electric. So that seems to be a nice compromise for most people. It still gives some EV range, especially for plug-in hybrids, but also they have the fallback of gasoline-powered motor. There are a couple last points that I want to make about EVs, but so first is battery technology, such as the one that I shared this last fall, that will make some inroads in adoption rate of EVs. One on the forefront is Toyota's solid-state battery. So recently, there's been another step closer to making that a reality. Harvard University, they created a battery that can be charged and discharged 6,000 times, more than any other battery cell. It has all to do with the plating and the stripping of dendrites, or the plaque on the cells. So they figured out a process to make that happen more quickly, so the battery can now recharge in 10 minutes. And their application will first be actually introduced into cell phones, and then it'll just be a matter of time before the development moves into electric vehicles. So in addition to that, the Biden administration just announced that they're going to invest $7.5 billion for the EV infrastructure in the U.S., and part of that is $623 million to put 7,500 more EV stations on the road. And the project involves 22 states, I think it is, and Puerto Rico. So the goal of the administration is to have 500,000 publicly available chargers by 2030. So I think that those types of innovations and aggressive programs will have some positive influence on public opinion of EVs going forward. So let's move the discussion to the future of automotive repair. So I believe that it'll continue to be influenced by several key trends and advancements. Here are some of the potential developments that could shape the auto repair industry in the coming years that all of us as a group will need to work together to be ready for these particular changes. We'll need to focus some time on our upcoming meetings, along with develop training from Elite to prepare all of us and our staff for the future. So I have a list of several things that I think that many of them are going to be things that we are already aware of, but I think that we need to keep in our frontal lobes. First is looking at advanced diagnostic and telematics. Vehicles are becoming more connected through advanced telematics. The connectivity allows for real-time monitoring of vehicle performance and can help diagnose issues remotely. But automotive repair shops will increasingly rely on sophisticated diagnostic tools and training to identify and address the problems. The second thing that I think we need to have on our some focus on is electrification and the hybridizations, just like we've gone through, because the growing prevalence of these particular type vehicles will lead towards changes in the types of repairs that are needed. And I think repair shops will need to adapt to service electric drivetrains and batteries and associated components. Training technicians and handling high voltage systems is going to become more crucial with change in battery types, like we've talked about with just over the last year and the technology and where it's advancing to. The third thing is looking at autonomous vehicles. So the emergence of all of that will bring new changes and challenges and opportunities. And while these vehicles are designed to be safer and have fewer accidents, they still may require regular maintenance and software updates. And repair shops may need to specialize in unique needs of autonomous vehicle systems. The fourth thing that I think is an opportunity as well is the use of 3D printing and manufacturing replacement parts. I think it's going to be expected to grow. Repair shops may be able to produce custom or hard to find parts on site, reducing wait times for customers and potentially lowering costs. Kurt Adler up in Anchorage is already doing this and producing parts for Subarus up in that area. And I think that that will become more prevalent as time goes on, that we need to pay attention to. And then augmented reality is number 5 for repairs. So AR can be used to provide technicians with real-time information and guidance during repairs. So this technology can overlay digital information onto the physical world, really helping mechanics identify and fix problems more efficiently. And I've showed you a video in the past about headsets that will give them the ability to be able to have a virtual way of being able to walk them through the process of how to repair or maintain a vehicle. And then the 6th one is looking at predictive maintenance. So with the help of data analytics and machine learning or AI, automotive systems can be monitored, predict when when components are likely to fail. So this can lead to proactive maintenance, reducing downtime, preventing more significant issues. And again, from a marketing standpoint or information for your advisors at the counter and working with your customers, I think this is going to be in the near term. So I think watch for companies like Preddy that have already started smart servicing utilizing AI. As a side note, I believe that everyone should be interacting with AI now and requiring your staff to learn it in order to use it better for their performance and all of their roles. It's truly in its infancy, but I think it's going to be a big part of our lives in the very near future. And I believe that we need to develop, the other thing I think is also important is to look at the possibility of coming up with ways of improving the way we sell tires with a predictive tire replacement. We've already got the data that's in the system in order to be able to accomplish this. And if those of you that are looking to get involved more in tires, which I think is an important step for many repair shops to move into the tire realm. But I keep thinking about the fact that, if we're measuring tread depth every time a customer is coming in for maintenance or even a tire rotation, we should be able to determine when that tire's useful life is going to be over. And so being able to look at contacting your customers ahead of time and making them aware of what might be available for them coming up, or specials that the tire manufacturers are promoting for tires for them, and trying to be more useful in when those tires are going to need to be replaced, I think is going to be something that we should be pressing a lot of our shop management software companies to help us with. Number 7 is looking at green initiatives. I think there's a growing emphasis on environmentally friendly practices. Certainly with millennials, and now even more pronounced with Gen Z. I think automotive repair shops need to adopt more eco-friendly methods, such as recycling or proper disposal of hazardous materials, and really starting to align and broadcast what their sustainability goals are going to be. The 8th is looking at subscription-based maintenance services. I think some companies are exploring subscription models for vehicle maintenance instead of one-time repairs. Consumers may subscribe to ongoing maintenance services. There's been guys that have tried this in the past, but I think that if we're going to look at trying to get customers in on a more regular basis, especially as they move away from ICE vehicles, to ensure that they have regular checkups and prompt repairs as part of a comprehensive package, I think it's something as a group we need to start to explore as more customers move into EVs. And then next, looking at cybersecurity concerns as vehicles become more connected and reliant on software. There's an increased risk of cyber threats. So automotive repair shops may need to address cybersecurity issues, or it may even be a situation where protecting customer data and the integrity of vehicle systems becomes somewhat of a specialty for some of you that I think that we should explore. And then looking at changing skill sets for technicians. So the skills required for automotive technicians to evolve with the advancements in technologies going forward is going to be very critical. So technicians need and will need training in areas such as software programming, electronics, data analysis to effectively diagnose and modern repair to repair modern vehicles. So in addition to technical expertise, I think the other thing that's going to be important to note is we've got to get our technicians to be stronger communicators and be, I think that that's going to be increasingly important. Technicians will need to interact even better with advisors and customers to explain really complex issues and solutions, especially vehicles becoming more technology advanced. And so I think that may be part of the focus that we at Elite maybe need to think about and looking at how we're going to get technicians to be better communicators with advisors. So the demand for skilled technicians will remain strong as the industry evolves. New career opportunities will arise, such as roles in cybersecurity for connected vehicles or positions related to autonomous vehicle maintenance. So overall, I think the future of independent automotive repair and automotive technicians will be shaped by ongoing evolution of vehicle technology and the ability of the industry professionals such as you, all of you, to adapt to these changes. So continuous learning and proactive approach to staying abreast of industry trends will be essential for the success of all of us. So continuing education within the group, along with innovative thinking and planning by other outside training companies, will be essential to keeping you and your businesses prepared for competing in the industry and providing the best customer experience. So really, what's the focus that I'm looking for out of the group over the next 5 years? So as leaders and visionaries of your businesses, I've given some deep thought to this, and I have 10 points that I feel should be part of the longer term goals. Call it a strategic plan if you want. So, but these address both industry specific challenges and general business strategies. Some of them we've already had some discussion on, but overall, these are the 10 points going forward that I think are going to be important to note. So looking first of all is to invest in training technology. I want to encourage you and your staff to engage in ongoing training for technicians to stay updated on the latest automotive technologies, including electric and hybrid systems, advanced diagnostics, and software applications. I know I reviewed a lot of the numbers on how much is being invested in training overall, and I feel the group overall is investing too little. So I think you need to invest in your advisors. They need to be updated. They need to have updated tools to provide a higher level of service and experience for your guests. So really get them what they need. Advocate the adoption of cutting edge diagnostic tools and software to enhance the shop's capabilities and efficiency. Move forward with the investment before the technology really overwhelms your staff. And every single person in the business needs to have some exposure to AI. So have them interact with the technology now. Yes, it's in its infancy. Yes, it's really clunky. But nonetheless, I think it's really important. One of the things that I had suggested to a couple of folks is to look at trying to have AI, and you'll find this will be pretty amazing. So get on to ChatGPT with your service advisor and ask ChatGPT to be a difficult customer to sell to, and let ChatGPT know that you're going to look at selling this difficult customer a front brake job on whatever type of vehicle. Give it as much information as possible. ChatGPT will be an amazingly difficult customer to sell to by just interacting with it. So look for ways of being able to enhance what you're doing with your staff and getting creative ways to interact with AI. Next is to specialize and differentiate. So identify niche markets or specialized services that align with your strengths and the demands for your local customer base. So this could include becoming experts in certain vehicle makes and models, focusing on electric vehicle repairs, offering unique services. In the coming years, I think it's going to be more difficult to work on everything for every customer. The third thing is to look at customer education and communication. So I want you to promote transparent and effective communication with your customers. And I would like you to encourage you to invest in customer education programs that explain complex repairs, explain what technology that has to be discovered and what you have to do to interact with that technology, and what preventative maintenance will be in the future, because I think it's going to foster more trust and more loyalty. It'll be important, more important than ever, to build strong customer relationships through personalized service, timely communication, and customer-centric approach. So use technology to help you achieve this goal. Maybe more of a move to car care seminars and lunch and learns would be helpful as well. Next is looking at embracing sustainability. So I want to encourage each of you to reach farther in developing environmentally friendly practices. This may involve promoting the repair and vehicle maintenance of electric and hybrid vehicles, and maybe implementing recycling programs for waste materials, and exploring energy efficient practices within the shop. I think younger generations are assessing businesses and making decisions based on your messaging and follow through with sustainable business practices. So let's do a better job, not only on what we're doing, but how we're communicating that. The fifth thing is adopting digital marketing and an online presence. It's more important than ever to expand your online presence, including user-friendly website, social media engagement, online reviews. A lot of you have been doing a pretty good job with this, but I think it's going to be even more important going forward. So now is a good time to set up good measurables to judge the return on your marketing investment. It will be important to leverage digital marketing strategies really to reach a broader audience and enhance your visibility in your local market. Number 6 is efficient operations and workflow. And we've had some discussion within the group looking at this and being a good student within your business, but I think you need to evaluate and optimize the shop's workflow and operational processes. So streamlining operations can improve efficiency, reduce turnaround times, and enhance the overall customer experience. So I would explore technology solutions for inventory management, parts procurement, scheduling, customer relationships management to really streamline a lot of the administrative tasks. And AI will have some large influence on improving a lot of those procedures. So let's continue to explore as a group what will be available over the next 5 years. Number 7 is to stay informed on industry trends and regulations. So obviously, I love to watch trends in the market and in our industry, and our industry is facing some very rapid change on many fronts. So staying informed about the latest industry trends, regulatory changes, emerging technologies, I think are going to be more critical. So I want to make sure that I continue to provide regular updates on how these changes may impact your business. And we need to work as a group to create really some proactive strategies for adaptation. Number 8 is looking at financial management and planning. So we do a great job within the group of talking about numbers and looking at how your businesses operate based on the numbers. But creating financial plans and budgeting for the coming years ahead will give you a better roadmap of what you can expect out of the business. So I'm happy to assist in setting some realistic financial goals, monitoring some of the key performance indicators, and make some data-driven decisions to ensure some long-term sustainability as we move through the next 5 years. So next is looking at networking collaboration. So I want to encourage more collaboration within the community of Elite. Maybe you could make it a goal to reach out to one another, to another shop owner every month to learn more about them. It's easy to continue to develop friendships within this group, but there's such a vast knowledge that I know many of you have that are not really tapped into the wealth of that knowledge yet. So networking with other shops, industry professionals, and suppliers can really provide some valuable insights, support, and potential business opportunities. And number 10 is adaptability and resilience. So we need to prepare for unforeseen challenges and disruptions by fostering adaptability and resilience. So we need to develop contingency plans such as remote work capabilities, backup suppliers, and crisis communication strategies. Greg Skolnick, a great coach within Elite and also part of ProService, and I've had the pleasure of working with for years and years and years, is a really perfect example of how things can happen. With his shop suddenly coming under siege from a fire and him having to shut down business and then being resourceful to find other avenues to be able to have his business continue was extremely important. It wasn't just the loss of revenue or the loss of potential wages for technicians if you didn't have the right insurance, but it's more the situation of customers waiting for you to reopen. We don't want them to migrate to other sources if you're unable to adapt to an unforeseen challenge. So the evolving landscape, in my opinion, for the automotive repair industry is really inevitable. So what's important is that I'll be here to watch for road signs to help you navigate, along with the support from other resourceful people on the team from Elite. So most importantly, those within the group, within this group especially, are leaders in this industry and will continue to accept challenges for 2024 and beyond. So thank you for spending time with me today, and thank you for being part of Elite and Pro Service.
Awesome, Jim. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Lots of good information there. I love that list. Hopefully everybody's writing down notes. I think we probably should send a follow-up email to everybody and give them all of those notes and bullet points.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Great. Lots of good stuff. I think it's interesting when we were having a meeting with Dan yesterday, he was telling us that a lot of the AROs across the board dropped a lot in January. And I think that just goes along with your number one point, is making sure that we're doing everything we can to take care of the customers. They're being a little bit more spooked when it comes to purchasing. I think the economy is, retracting a little bit. So,
well, and yes and no, but it's cautious behavior, right?
Exactly.
Whatever it's their reality, regardless of what's going on humming in the background, it's their reality. So we have to be cognizant of that and react to it.
Yeah. Cool. We've actually got quite a few questions here, Jim. So let's start with Greg Buckley. He's had some questions for a little bit here. So okay. Greg, let me go ahead and turn on your mic here.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, great presentation.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, very good. I was really keying in on a few things as you were going along, pretty much commentary, but when you get to the inflation point of everything, I've always noticed on certain cycles that, as we ramp up the inflation due to demand on, products and or services, labor lags, and then you get the opposite effect. You get the demand dwindles, but yet the labor kind of like starts to come up, and finally it gets back to the means, and we have higher price points, but then we look at the percentages and things start to normalize a little bit. Is that where you see we're coming to a point in, and from that point on, will we be finally in like a normalized, kind of like a regular economic cycle?
So here's the wild cards. So do I think that will happen? It's a strong maybe, but here's where I'm reserved in my thoughts. Is that number one, we don't really talk about it much in the group, and it's really not talked all that much really on general news feeds and that type of thing. But we have there's three things that I think that potentially will not help us in a normalized cycle. One is a lot of the geopolitical risks. I mean, if you look at it, right now there's 110 armed conflicts around the world, right? So then that disrupts supply chains, it disrupts other economies. It's the most since World War II. So could we see that have some eventual effect on the United States? Maybe, right? I mean, we're the strongest economy in the world, but it could have some effect. The next thing that I think we have to look at is looking at office commercial property. So there's been a lot of leverage in office commercial property. And at that point, if there starts to be any kind of cracks within that segment of investment, that could also have some negative implications on normal business cycle. And the third thing, which most of us really don't want to even talk about, it's kind of a head in the sand thing, is looking at the rising interest costs on national debt. So that being the case, those could have influence on normalized business cycle at this point. Will it? I don't know at this point. So I'm happy to say I don't know, because nobody else knows either. So that being the case, I feel like I'm in a pretty good position to at least talk about it. Mm-hmm. So I think we can go through those assumptions, but I think as business owners, we need to pay attention to some of these other underlying things that may occur that could derail what we're feeling comfortable about from a normalization standpoint.
Okay. I mean, I was just talking to my banker yesterday, and I asked her, what's the temperature, for lending? And I'm looking forward to, securing both of these properties and redoing things. And she said that investment property is out the door. There's nobody that's going to lend on an investment property. If you have an income producing situation, then you have opportunities ahead of you. So, I don't want to be afraid of going after things much, maybe like some of the others here as well. But this rising rates and inflation and, the wages are the biggest thing. I tend to see that at some point it's got to come to, being a little bit more normal. You've given great scenarios, 110 conflicts across the globe and shipping channels, everything being interrupted. That does put a lot of question marks in the air. So
it does, but Greg, again, at the end of the day, from the standpoint of you going out and securing the best ways to buy money, I think the opportunity is still going to be there. I think that we're going to see some decrease in interest rates going forward. I mean, I don't know what your timing is like, and I'm happy to spend a little time one-on-one chatting about what you're trying to accomplish. But at the end of the day, we are seeing a bit of a fade in the interest rate environment, and there are still opportunities to be able to secure financing at some reasonable rates, and so reasonable in this time period. So we're never going to see the great rates we once saw, but nonetheless, if I'm still getting, and I'm sure you're measuring cap rates and looking what the return on the investment's going to be by securing these particular investments, I think that there's still opportunity. I mean, I invest a lot in storage unit space, and so there's still opportunities to be able to finance in that space, and be able to produce some pretty good return on investment, or whatever you're looking for, for an IRR over a time period. So it just depends on what you're looking to accomplish. But overall, I think that there's still good opportunity.
So thank you, Jim.
Yep.
All right. Great question. Gary Gunter, he's got a question for you too, Jim. So let me turn on Gary's mic here.
Is that penguin driving you crazy?
It's
driving me crazy.
It is.
Yeah, it's driving me crazy. Let's put up something that's more.
The penguin's great.
Hey, thanks.
I'm gonna go out and get one with all my money. Yeah, so Jim, just quick question, and you did touch on it a little bit. I'd had asked about kind of hydrogen before. As we talked about the decrease in EVs, I saw, BMW's got hydrogen in their back pocket. Toyota's been investing in hydrogen really heavy for a while. Do you have any beta kind of on maybe the uptick of manufacturing of hydrogen, and maybe that's coming down the pike with EVs decreasing?
Yep. So it's not been significant enough to hit the radar for any statistical information that I've been able to come across. However, I played a video. There's a good video on YouTube, and looking at Toyota's advancements in hydrogen. They've been one of the front runners in being able to accomplish this. So they currently have. Are you familiar, Gary, with the Mirai?
Yeah.
The Toyota Mirai.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Toyota Mirai currently is distributed in the state of California, and there are hydrogen stations within the state. So there is a very small pocket of vehicles that are operating, and so that's giving Toyota a bit of an edge, because there's actually some minor sales and some operation that's helping them to try and advance the technology along. But it doesn't seem like anybody has embraced that. The trucking industry is kind of looking at some of that as well, and so we'll see. But it's still it's such in its infancy that it really hasn't popped on the radar with a lot of people yet.
Yeah, and I know that the infrastructure is probably one of the biggest things. Like you were talking about charging stations for EVs, it's hydrogen stations. Bill's sitting here with me, and he had also had a question kind of about dry hydrogen that he had heard about not too long ago.
Yeah, no, I'm not even familiar with dry hydrogen.
I'm not either.
All right, well then we'll catch that one.
Something else to look on. Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Toyota sold less than 2,800 of the Marias.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah. Good question, Gary. Mr. Sean Blank, you're up next, buddy. Let me get you ready to go. There you go. Should be able to talk now.
All right. Hey guys, how you doing?
Awesome.
Thank you, Jim. Such a great presentation. A lot of information just to unpack. Kind of, I wanted to hit on like, all the AI stuff, and then also, you know, 3D printing, parts and stuff like that. Are there resources that you have that you can, send us all on that information? Because I've heard of a few shops making their own parts as well. So
So ping Darren, ping somebody so it'll pings me. And what I'll do is that so yes, I have some resource. And my biggest resource is Kurt Adler up at A&A the shop up in Anchorage, who's currently doing it. And there's one of the guys in the group, and he's going to be irritated at me that I don't remember who it is now. So but there's somebody else that's also involved in 3D printing. So what I can do is I can connect with them and see what they're currently utilizing for materials and for systems to be able to help you at least start down that path. Because I think it's going to be a valuable resource going forward, especially if there's any kind of supply interruptions in the future. But for guys like Kurt being up in Anchorage, he's got shipping issues, and he has, and he's working on some older Subarus that some of the parts are difficult to find. So having the ability to be able to replicate those parts is certainly valuable. Yeah. So ping Darren or somebody so they can
Sean, reach out to me, no problem.
Yeah, get it.
Awesome.
So you can get it in front of me, right? Because I manage my life by email and dates. So but I'm happy to help. And and then the other thing on the AI front is that when you look at certain disruptions in technology over time, and you see how the disruption of the printing press and what it did for the world, then you look at the disruption of electricity and what it did for the world, and you look at the disruption of computers and what it did for the world. AI, in my opinion, is this next major disruption. And so it's hard for us to see what that is, because we're all sitting in a room now with gas lamps hearing about electricity. And we don't understand what all of that means at this point. And really, the industry overall still is struggling with what could be developed as a result of all of it. But I think it is the next major disruption for all of us. And I think it's going to be a huge opportunity. And so I think getting involved, just even on a minor level, and use a free version of ChatGPT, I think is an important tool to start interacting with for not just you, but for your staff as well, because it's your staff that's going to need the tools going forward that are going to be provided within ChatGPT. So I'll give you another example. So there's a program out there that's called Way We Do. It's a way to be able to write SOP manuals. So Jeff Odom, my buddy, has a small business that he runs helping people with creating SOP manuals. So now within their software, they have a ChatGPT button, right? So if you're busy staring at a blank document and you're looking to try and write a procedure for something, and you put some initial thoughts into it, hit the ChatGPT button, and ChatGPT will help you expound the verbiage within that operation, right? So I can see where going forward, we could have a situation where even to speed, I'm just thinking out loud, right? So I'm just thinking, here's an opportunity. If we could get our garage management systems involved with having AI, and we have our technicians now speak into a device or their phone about the work that they just accomplished, instead of having our advisors going through the thought process of converting that tech language into customer language, what if I could just hit a button and have ChatGPT make the language conversion, plop it in the RO, and move to the next thing? I'm just looking at, there's efficiencies that can be built into what we're doing now within our operations that I think artificial intelligence will really help with. Or let's say another example, looking at predictive maintenance, right? So right now, Preddy has been in a relationship with Mitchell. So they have been collecting repair orders by the millions. So, and entering all of the system into AI. So now we could suddenly say, all right, So I'm now working with a fleet, and they have a 2020 set of Ford vans. And we can now say, hey, we know that because I'm operating in Vermont, that at 110,000 miles, this particular type of vehicle are going to have water pumps that are going to start failing at that mileage based on predictive maintenance, right? Or repairs. So how great would it be that you could suddenly make a presentation that's very valid to that fleet in order to be able to minimize breakdowns? Our recommendation is that we replace that water pump at 110,000 miles because statistically it fails. There's a 86% chance at 110,000 miles that water pump's going to go south. How great would that be for you to be able to look at being a better resource for the fleet that you're working with, having that kind of information? That's where I see a lot of AI going. And just briefly, I mean, I have lots of other thoughts about it, but I think I think you need to embrace it, and you need to embrace it now, at least start so you can start getting some familiarity with it, with you and your staff.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate you. All right. Let's go on to Patrick Walton has a question for you. We get his turned on now. Okay. All right. We're good. Patrick should be able to talk now.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Hey, how are you, lad?
Good, buddy. How are you this morning? Thanks for
Great.
everything, Jim. You're always awesome. I love waiting for these State of the Union addresses from you. They are spot on, and they're always great for us to listen to. So thank you for all you put into this.
My pleasure.
First thing, my question was kind of answered with your last question. Was there any particular type of companies that you know that already have Chat GPT style of sites that we could use for the auto industry, repair wise, that kind of stuff?
Yep. So Chat GPT, just OpenAI is the website that you want to go to, and utilizing just utilizing that free version of Chat GPT is a great place just to start.
Okay. I just didn't know if you had any specific ones that you knew of that were already set up with our industry or things like that yet.
No, I haven't seen it with our industry yet. I'm anticipating at some point in time, again, somebody's going to want to make money on it, so they're gonna figure out a way to probably incorporate it within their current systems. Is what I suspect that we're going to see, as opposed to making it more web enabled, that's going to help the auto industry in some particular way. I'm going to guess that's where it's going to come from initially.
Dan Buss likes to make money, so he'll do it for us.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate the question, and thank you for everything.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. Next, we got Mr. Craig Noel. Craig, I've got your mic turned on, bud. You'll need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Am I good?
Yes,
hey,
sir.
I thought you were interviewing an advisor.
I am, but I will get there in time. I've allotted enough Murphy time to be able to adequately absorb the information. First of all, I will say, as usual, Jim, very nice, and thank you. I would also add to this that, I plan on well, two things. One, are you going to announce where this is going to be put, maybe on the Elite website and or Pro Service dashboard for access?
Yeah, so I'll get with Darren and figure out the best place to do that.
We'll make sure we get it.
We might put it on a couple different places, but you know how I'm always willing to share after doing these. So
yeah, absolutely. So the reason
one way or another, I'll definitely have it to Pro Service, and then we can figure out for everybody else with Darren what we'll plan on doing.
We'll get it figured out. No problem at all.
All right, very good. The reason I had stated that is because I find this very interesting on its face, but I think as a higher management team would be something to show them, because I think the forward advancement and thinking about both our industry and what's coming down the pike, when you can talk about the community and the nation at large, I think it's very eye-opening. I think it makes people think outside the box, which is great. The second thing that I wanted to kind of chat about was your 10 points. I think you are definitely spot on. Over the last probably 10 years, it's been interesting to see people adapt to different specific targeted technologies that might work, whether that be any kind of web targeted things or social media targeted things. But when you start talking about AI and what it's potentially there to unleash, I think especially related to the apprenticeship path, and to quickly get techs up to speed, I think is going to be very fascinating. So I just want to throw that out there. The second thing I wanted to add
So
to
can
the
I interrupt
conversation.
just a second, Craig?
Yeah.
So I think, again, from looking at especially when we're talking about apprentice technicians or apprentice programs, I really want to see the path that we're going to do as a group and really kind of keep focused on as to where augmented reality is going to go, because I think that is going to be more key in accelerating the learning of young people. There are already so many of them that are into gaming or utilizing methods, ocular headsets, things of that nature. They're already more in tune to utilizing that technology than you or I. And so I think that we've got to look at augmented reality as being a way for us to really chart a path to help them accelerate their learning.
I 100% agree, and I won't let too much of the cat out of the bag, but what I'll be able to present at the host shop here in my facility with regards to some forward vision, I think will be pretty entertaining regarding that. So on my training center. Anyway, okay, moving on to the EV thing. A little bit of information I got yesterday relative to your statistics on the wave of EVs that were sold, during 2020, 2021. It's interesting because the manufacturers, at least I can only speak to the Ford side of it, the manufacturers are extending not only powertrain coverage, but accessory coverage. And then they're also reaching out to current owners and past owners to extend percentages of cost relative to extending their warranty. It's because of trying to retain them within the manufacturer. The reason I'm bringing all that up is I find it interesting because as we start to plot on what the future may look like, I think it's going to be interesting to understand the delay effect potentially with maybe the markets and our independents seeing the EVs. So just want to throw that out there.
Yep. I think that there'll be some of that, but if they are looking at trying to keep them within their particular ecosystems, and they know that, again, if you look at pricing of EVs when they are now enter the used market, they are much softer. And so, will that then give those that are of different economic classes more opportunity to be able to look at purchasing an EV sooner than they may have anticipated if the market for used suddenly has more units available, right? At more competitive pricing. So it'll be interesting to see if the trending that direction happens, and if it does, then that I think it sparks all of us within the group to really think about seizing the opportunity of getting them within the fold of repairs or maintenance within your operations sooner than later.
Absolutely. And thank you very much, Jim. Thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Cool. It looks like Zach has a comment. He says Kurt Adler is not printing 3D parts. So I don't know if let me
He's not. He was saying
I don't know.
was.
I gave him his
What
mic
is
here,
that?
so let's hear what he has to say. Zach, I turned on your mic, buddy, if you want to talk.
Oh, okay. Well, it was really just more of a statement. Kurt's not 3D printing. He was at one time exploring the idea of it. Really the best thing to have going in that respect is we have a machinist. He kind of comes in and he'll design parts for some special thing that we have going on, or we had like a transmission case crack one time that on a check plug, and it was kind of a weird deal, but instead of replacing the transmission to make sure it wasn't leaking anymore, he was able to create his own adapter thing to make a good fix for it. So we're not 3D printing parts. Is all.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'll still lean on Kurt because he certainly has more information than most of us.
He's played with it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zach.
So
that's great.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Looks like all the questions are down and the hands are down as well. So yeah, looks like that's it. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Great. Yeah, love it. Lots of good information.
Definitely.
And thank you guys all for being here too.
It's a good hobby.
No, it's a good thing. Yeah, you enjoy it. You didn't mention your book. You got to mention your book that you always talk about.
Which book?
The Creature from Jekyll Island. You need to talk to everybody about that book and how important it is. I think it's a great book. Very powerful.
So there is a book that's out there. Let me stop sharing real quick so they can have the opportunity to pull this up for you. But there's a book that I truly like. It is a book that is it on the first half of the book. It is it's a fascinating read in history, but the last part of it you could throw away because it's really laborious. So let's see. And actually, I can send you a PDF of it as well because I do have it in that form. But it's called. So let me start the share again. So this is the book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. So if you really want to learn how the Federal Reserve System came into being, this is the book that you'll want to read. And it's interesting because most people view the Federal Reserve as a government entity, which it is not. It is a for-profit operation. It is a bank. And so it's interesting how the Federal Reserve was created in secrecy. And there was a group of wealthy individuals that controlled, I'd say, probably around a third of the world's wealth in the United States at that time. And they took a secretive train ride to Jekyll Island, Georgia. And so that's where the cloak and dagger story comes from. And so they then presented it to the federal government as a way to be able to create banking stability and in order for the federal government to be able to borrow money, another avenue to borrow money. And
Very good book.
Yeah. So it's
very good.
So
book.
it's something that if you really want to learn about the Federal Reserve, this is a good book. And if you really want to, if you want some reinforcement of that, all of you that are in the audience, pull out a $1 bill right now and read what's on it. Most everybody thinks it is a US dollar. It is not a US dollar. It is a Federal Reserve note, and you'll see that's what's printed on it. So you'll have a better understanding of what you're dealing with.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Jim.
Yep.
Okay, any of you guys that are in Top Shop and want to learn more about Pro Service, reach out to Tom Amaro, and he can get you more information on Pro Service and love to get you involved in this peer group and lots of good people there and really a great group of people. So anyway, thank you again, Jim. Thank you, Dan, for being here. And thanks to everybody for attending and being part of this.
My pleasure. It was great. Yep. If anybody has any other additional questions or whatever, certainly email me. And if you don't know my email address, then get it through Darren and get it to me. So
yep. It's pretty simple. It's j.murphy@eliteworldwide.com.
Yep.
Really pretty simple. But yeah, reach out to me too. Either way, we'll get it for you.
Okay.
But, thanks again, guys. And we will send you a follow-up email that has that list of the 10 things and link to the webinar today too. So
yep. Absolutely.
Have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.
Thanks a bunch, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.